Wait, this isn't right. Greetings, Retro Zoltan here. Today I would like to talk to you about the TrimUI Brick. And I'm sorry, but I have to get this out of my system. When I first heard about this device like 2 years ago, I honestly thought the name was a joke because most people that fiddle with electronic devices know you can brick devices, which is screwing them up so bad they become useless. It's a term. So the name choice to me is not only bad, but maybe also bad luck also. There are other terms that say you killed your device. So I guess stay tuned for the Ambernick doorstop and the Data Frog anchor coming soon. Still though, maybe it's genius because out of all the names of so many systems, this one is pretty memorable. So let's take a look at the TrimUI Brick, how it relates to previous models, and if it can beat its obvious rival, the Miyoo Mini Plus. TrimUI has been a company I've always been interested in, to the point where I started the TrimUI subreddit that in all honesty took off once a guy named Haru took over. It's clear I should stick to other things. And holy crap, it's over 10,000 users. When I walked away, it was like 200. At least I'm still a mod. Let's continue. It all started with the TrimUI S that everyone forgets about, the TrimUI Smart, the TrimUI Smart Pro, and of course the TrimUI Brick. This, in all fairness, is their first vertical handheld, so I had to have one. And because I'm incredibly spoiled, I got it as a gift, and I'm finally taking a deep dive on this. The brick comes in a white, black, a fancy red, which I have, and a purple. They go for $50 to $70 depending on if you get games and what size SD you want. And I have to say I've noticed this is the trend lately, which I think is kind of nice if you want to make your own SD and save a few bucks. Not like those SD cards are high quality most of the time anyway, so make sure you do your backups if you can. Unboxing the brick is the normal affair. Foam protector, instructions, USB charging cable, and the most interesting, extra trigger and shoulder buttons, which I'll talk about shortly. The device, when holding it, feels heavy. The plastic on it feels like a good quality also. The backside particularly is aluminum for what I'm assuming may be a way to stay cool. The layout looks about what you expect. D-pad and a mess of buttons ready to explore. So let's do so. I have to be honest, the D-pad on the brick feels tight, like super tight. It feels like there's no rubber membrane or just like micro switches. Like, what's under there? It feels weird, and I'll have to explore this during gameplay. But I'm fairly sure diagonals will be harder to pull off on this thing. Perhaps it just needs some breaking in. The ABXY buttons are easy to press, but they're a bit noisy. If that sort of thing bothers you, you should probably know. I don't expect any problems, and if you like that tactile click feel, you won't really have an issue here. Also on the front is the screen. I haven't even turned it on yet, but the brick promises a 3.2-inch 1024 by 768 IPS laminated screen, which sounds pretty good. Also on the front are the expected buttons, which is a sort of a start, select, and menu button. Right under the screen are what are labeled in the instructions as function buttons, literally F1 and F2, which is pretty interesting. Not sure what they're used for yet, but I'm fairly sure they light up. Also on the front are dual speakers, which of course I love to see. These are in the perfect spot. On the top, interestingly enough, only has a small light bar, which is used for what the instructions say is atmospheric light. Very curious how this is going to look. The bottom sports an SD card slot, a reset button, USB charging port, a microphone, and a headphone jack. When I see systems with one SD card, I get a little sad. This might prove challenging when adding games or trying custom firmware, but time will tell.
Time has told.
The sides sport a volume rocker switch, a power button, and a function button to turn off the lights and other things. On the back, of course, are trigger and shoulder buttons, which in all fairness feel very shallow. Maybe it's my big fingers, but it feels like half of my fingers can grab at them, like I can't get a good grip. Even worse, I can't say I like the feel of these. And even though you can change out the keycaps that are different shapes, I didn't truly like any of the other options either. Maybe during gameplay, I can overlook this and get over it. The slight gap between the case and the triggers, I believe, will light up as well. So that'll look pretty cool, I think. Quick stats for the TrimUI Brick are the following. The screen is a 3.2-inch 1024 by 768 IPS laminated screen. The CPU is an all-winner A133+. GPU is a PowerVR GE8300. Type-C charging, lots of mood lighting, and a 3000 milliamp battery that lasts about 5 hours, depending on what you're playing. It has a rumble motor, Bluetooth, and thank goodness Wi-Fi. Booting up the device by holding down the button, you can easily see all the places the mood lighting takes effect. It's a nice touch. And of course, you can turn these off quickly in the display settings, or tweak a few settings here. If you have a favorite color, sadly the menu isn't going to let you change it to green, for instance. The only options you have is to follow the theme, which will change the color depending on what game system you're playing, or default that does some bizarre things. It's clear the stock OS on this thing needs a bit of updating. Aside from the LED customization, the menu is a bit different from what I was expecting. To make things easier, I guess, they made a best section, which is a collection of sorts. One called Nostalgic Minigames has selections such as Castlevania Circle of the Moon. I mean, I like that game, but is it a mini game by any stretch of the imagination? No, not even close. Out of the box, trying to load these, they're not even working anyway. Keep in mind your results may vary out of the box, but the potential for failure is there.
You lose!
Other collections like Bomberman, Famicom multi-cartridges are there as well, and they work at least, and that's it. Kind of a weird thing that they added, but maybe if you can make your own collection somehow, it might be worth having. Let's move on. The game section obviously is where I want to be, and my TrimUI Brick is ready to play. Arcade, Atari Lynx, Atari 2600, 7800, CPS 1 through 3, Dreamcast, Easy RPG, Final Burn Neo, Famicom, Sega Game Gear, Game & Watch, Game Boy Color, and MAME. Also included is the Sega Mega Drive, Sega Master System, Nintendo 64, Nintendo DS, Neo Geo Pocket, Open Bore, PC Engine, PGM, Pico 8, Sony PSP, PlayStation, Super Nintendo, Sega Saturn, and WonderSwan. Gameplay on the TrimUI Brick looks great, until you reach systems like Nintendo 64, PSP, and Sega Saturn, where performance becomes inconsistent. Powered by the all-winner A133 Plus, this device handles classic 8-bit and 16-bit consoles, and even PlayStation 1 runs well. However, once you step into N64, PSP, or Saturn territory, the limitations of the hardware start to show. While some N64 games are playable, others suffer from slowdowns and graphical glitches. PSP performance is hit or miss, with simpler 2D games running fine, but demanding 3D titles struggling. As for Saturn, the complex architecture makes the emulation extremely difficult, with most games running poorly. Ultimately, the A133 Plus is best suited for retro games up to PS1, with anything beyond that being an experiment rather than a smooth experience. Keep in mind, tweaking the system can get you better results. I've heard some users being able to play PSP games with no issues at all, but in most cases it requires tweaking certain settings or using a different operating system altogether. The stock firmware with its included SD card also has a handful of other goodies. In the ports section like Diablo Hellfire, Sonic Mania, and Stardew Valley if you're ready to sell your soul to a pixelated farm. To be honest, if you've never played it, it's worth a go. The D-pad use I found very challenging. I mean, I couldn't even walk up the ladder in the 2600 version of Donkey Kong, which is pretty sad. After a while, though, you sort of mentally get over it and work its diagonals harder, getting you there. Which is fine, but your thumb is going to get uncomfortable after a while. I've done a bit of research, and what people are doing with this is they're replacing the current internal membranes with 3DS ones for a better experience. If you feel yourself getting tendonitis using the brick, this is probably something you might consider. The trigger buttons were not my favorite when reaching back for games that needed them. Given the size of my hands, perhaps, it's my issue, but I have a feeling I might have the advantage if anything. Kind of. Still, not comfortable by any means, but doable. It's fortunate I avoid games that need them usually. Something super interesting mentioned by a watcher, Alec Denham, is that the TrimUI Brick is more fitting for Pico 8 emulation than other systems because the resolution matches up better. And after counting my fingers, he's correct. Pico 8 uses a 128 by 128 pixel output, and the TrimUI Brick has a 1024 by 768 screen. So if you really love Pico 8 games and you want perfect scaling, this certainly gets you closer, and even closer than the Embernet Cube XX ever could. Is the TrimUI Brick enough to dethrone a favorite like the Miyoo Mini Plus? Almost. Both the TrimUI Brick and the Miyoo Mini Plus offer solid performance for 8-bit and 16-bit systems, but sometimes have performance struggles with the more demanding systems like PSP and Sega Saturn. The screen on the TrimUI, even though it's smaller, looks a bit better to me than the Miyoo Mini Plus. A statement I didn't think I was going to make. The controls, however, vastly differ, as in I prefer the feel of the Miyoo Mini D-pad and trigger buttons much better. Just holding it, the Miyoo Mini Plus feels like a better thought-out device. Still, there are ways to make the brick more comfortable using modifications, something that is pretty common for Miyoo Mini Plus owners. I even saw a grip for the brick that makes the entire thing feel like a Game Boy Color. I just begged my friend Dave to print me one, so fingers crossed. Either way, I'll send the link to the printables below. I'm positive it's a game changer. Also worth noting in comparison, the Miyoo Mini arguably has a bit of a longer battery life. And if you're being picky, the TrimUI Brick also gets slightly warm over time. I don't think it gets super hot, not a huge deal in my opinion, especially if you're cold, but you should probably know if you don't like that sort of thing.
Your hands are burnt.
Yes.
Also, before I forget, I had a case made for my TrimUI Brick from Pigalope Custom Crochet, and it looks great and fits perfectly. Since this doesn't come with a case, I highly recommend it. And of course, I'll provide a link below. I thought perhaps the TrimUI Brick would be the next generation vertical handheld emulator, one to make Miyoo a bit nervous. But I honestly think it's about the same, and slightly less due to a few differences that matter to me. It's still a great device. And if you're into TrimUI, it's worth getting. But if you already have a Miyoo Mini or Mini Plus, it's not going to buy you much more, unless if you really like the extras that the TrimUI Brick has. It does light up, and even warms up your hands, no doubt. It's a contender, but I don't believe it's better. Not yet. I'm guessing and hoping TrimUI doesn't stop, and maybe, perhaps, we'll make a revised version of this. More powerful, perhaps. Less brick and more polish. And that's all I have to say about the TrimUI Brick. Thanks for watching, and if you like chatting about this sort of thing and want to become part of the Retro Zoltan community, please consider joining my Discord. And if you want to help the channel in other ways, you can be a patron and see my videos not available to the public, as well as watching my videos days before they're released. Thank you for watching, thank you for your support, and as always, I'll see you next time. Bye.